Hello, my name is Sean Miller, and this is my presentation for the case study Copyright in the Computer Regulations Governing Technology. So, I'd like to introduce you to the key players in this case study. First, this case study is set at St. Regis Schools. It's a K-8 school, and it's located about 25 miles outside of a larger area. And so they're set in a little bit more of a rural or a suburban area. And they struggle for funding. And so this is Principal Mr. Keith Sample. It's his third year as the St. Regis K-8 principal. This is the PTA president, Mrs. Evans. And this is the computer library assistant, Mrs. Lynn. It's her first year. And I'd like to introduce the K-8 teachers, but really specifically the third grade teachers, Mrs. Williams and Mrs. Brandon. And another role player that plays into this is the parent and faculty committee of the PTA. So next, I'd like to discuss what's happening. So I created a timeline to walk through what's happening behind this case study. So first of all, Mr. Sample has worked as principal of St. Regis for 3 years. After a year or two, he found out that through a survey that he has more supporters and resistors in the school and community. After 3 years of fundraising, the PTA and school faculty both agreed to purchase new computers by housing 20 computers. The goal was to purchase new software over the next 2 years. The district applied for waivers from the DOE, from the Department of Education, to fill the media specialist position with a teacher assistant named Mrs. Lynn. The school found that they couldn't hire somebody for this role, that just wasn't anybody available in their area. And so Mrs. Lynn and Mr. Sample worked together to prioritize new software programs based on their teachers' requests. And so new software is stored in the computer lab. Mrs. Lynn develops a schedule that each teacher had a scheduled time with the lab, and all but 3 teachers used this lab frequently. It was something that the school used and they were excited about. So then from this, teachers approached Mrs. Lynn about supplementing their classroom activities with independent use of the single computers in their classrooms. And so teachers said, we love this resource. Now we want to bring it back and use it. So that guy's in a bad spot. So teachers then asked Mrs. Lynn to copy the newly purchased software program so they can be used in all classrooms. Mrs. Lynn ordered several flash drives for making multiple copies of computer programs and said, okay, you asked for it, I'm going to do it. So Mrs. Lynn distributed the flash drives to Mrs. Williams, an experienced teacher, and Mrs. Brandon, a new teacher at St. Regis. So Mrs. Williams was thankful while Mrs. Brandon was concerned about copyright violation. Mrs. Bryn stated that teachers were not allowed to make multiple copies at her old school. Mrs. Lynn stated, well, I don't care what you did in your other schools. At St. Regis, we have to make every penny count. I don't have a fancy degree like you, so I don't know all the rules. So this is a key conversation in the case study of Mrs. Lynn being hired to do something or not being trained effectively. Mrs. Brandon then stated that she and Mrs. Williams ordered 2 programs each, and Mrs. Lynch made copies for the second and third and fourth grade levels so that they can be used for independent center activities. Because of the copyright laws, she refused the copies, but the other teachers did not. Mr. Sample found that the flash drives on Mrs. Lynn's desk. She stated that she found a way to save the school money. Mrs. Lynn stated that our parents work hard, and I've been told that many teachers want to have these programs copied and installed on their classroom computers. She then stated, do I need to call the PTA officer and explain how much money the school will save by copying these expensive and worthwhile programs? Our children deserve the best. So this is another key statement of little bit of a harassment or intimidation. Mr. Sample stated that she is violating copyright, and this comes with serious consequences for the school and school district if discovered by the publisher. He asked her to collect the money and stop making more. Mrs. Lynn then stated that there were 25 miles from the closest city, and the PTA president, Mrs. Evans, volunteered in the library, and she helped make the copies the day before. She was pleased that the PTA dollars were stretched and was helping teachers. So next, to keep my evaluation of this case study going, we got to ask ourselves what didn't happen. So, from my perspective, there was no specific protocol given on how to use the newly purchased software to the staff or the new librarian assistant. There was no training given to the staff about the copyright laws and policies. That teachers went to this new library assistant and they asked for essentially for her to break copyright law, and she unknowingly of a copyright law or even knowingly agreed to do it. And so this is a quote from The Simpson. Educators and administrators cannot direct their colleagues to make copies of copyright protected material, that this breaks copyright laws. Copyright holders take the righteous and serious, and no matter how small the infringement, a copyright owner is entitled to the redress. So this is just a foreshadow of the role and responsibility that staff members take. So the next the thing I'm going to look at is who is or might be involved in the or concerned by the situation. So the four people that play that role are Mrs. Evans, and she supposedly helped copy the flash drives and had a conversation with Mrs. Lynn, thanking her for stretching the PTA dollars. So to me, this puts the PTA president in a situation where the employer or the employee is feeling like she's satisfying the PTA president by breaking these copyright laws. Mrs. Williams, she was excited to get the copied flash drives. She may be involved in supporting the copying of flash drives. So Mrs. Williams is looking for that resource. And so really, Mrs. Lynn's being satisfied because she's pleasing Mrs. Williams. Mrs. Lynn, she knowingly made the copies of the instruction programs and distributed them to multiple teachers. And she admits that she doesn't understand the copyright laws, or she doesn't have the education to know all the laws. And then there's Mrs. Brandon. She understands that Mrs. Lynch is breaking the copyright laws, or Mrs. Lynn is breaking the copyright laws, and she addressed her concerns with Mr. Sample. Next, the characters that you don't hear about that are going to be concerned with this is the superintendent. That this, if this infringement happens and they get sued, superintendent's on the hot seat. The school district attorney is definitely going to be involved or concerned by this situation, that this is going to be by breaking this law. There's a lot more that's going to be on his plate. And also the software companies that, yes, their market is being affected by this. And so if this school does nothing, they're going to be really concerned with it. And the St. Regis community, I mean, really the integrity of the school is a big deal, as well as if they're sued or lose federal money as a result of this, then the short-handed school system that they have with the funding, that's going to get cut even shorter. So really the St. Regis community is going to get hit hard with this as well. So then the next is the question, has anybody been harmed by the action or decisions in another? And if so, in what way? So really the software company, St. Regis School, affected the market by copying the software license without permission or getting it permission. That by doing this and by distributing those flash drives, really the big risk is, okay, are there more flash drives out there that the school doesn't know about or the district doesn't know about, that really is going to affect the integrity of the school and the community. The town, which is already spread thin on money, is now at risk of being sued for violating copyright laws. If this would happen, the community would suffer by supporting the district to pay more, because then they're going to have to increase taxes to be able to pay for the liability or the lawsuit. Does the action or the situation contravene or the existing law? So I found two in here. I'm going to hide me for a minute so we could see this. So this comes from the U.S. Code 107, and this comes from the Cornell Law School. Move this up here. So notwithstanding the provisions of sections 106, the fair use of copyrighted work, including such use by reproduction, copies, or phone records, by any other means specified by which the section for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, research, is not an infringement of copyright. In determining whether the use made a work in any particular is a fair use, factors should be included. So first, the nature of the copyrighted work. Let me take that out. Um, and then the other, I highlighted these in reds because it specifically correlates to this case study. The effect of the use upon the potential market for the value of the copyrighted work. That those are two big things that hit this with, and the code 108 with copyright. Limitation on exclusive right, except as otherwise provided in the title. It is not an infringement of copyright for a library or archive of any of its employees acting within the scope of their employment to reproduce no more than one copy or phono record of a copy or distribute such copy or phono record under the conditions specified by this. The reproduction or distribution is made without any purpose of direct or indirect commercial advantage. So it's very clear that the school is doing this to create a cheaper resource for the school to get it. So yes, there's a commercial advantage. The reproduction or distribution of the work includes a notice of copyright. So with the distribution of the flash drives, there is no notice of the copyright, which is breaking this code 108. So with this case study, I mean, code 107 and code 108 with copyright laws, according to Cornell Law School, is violated. Next, was there a breach of contract? Was there discriminatory or constituted harassment? So according to the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, harassment becomes unlawful when conduct is severe or pervasive enough to create a work environment that a reasonable person would consider intimidating, hostile, or abusive. So when Mrs. Lynn commented, "Do I need to call the PTA officers and explain how much money the school has been saving?" I would consider this to be intimidating and possibly hostile. Assuming the Board of Education has a policy of copyright infringement, it would be safe to say that there was most definitely a breach of contract with Mrs. Lynn, Mrs. Evans, and the second, third, and fourth grade teachers for knowingly using it. Here now, put me up here. There we go. Did Mr. Sample's actions or lack of actions interfere with the current and future success of his students and teachers? How about their well-being? Mr. Sample's lack of actions in training in copyright law create a situation in which teachers were already distributed copies of the license before he handled the situations. This created a situation where teachers may have already used the software in a manner by taking it away from students. They feel that they are losing a resource that the students need to benefit from. By breaking copyright law, Mr. Sample's school is liable of being sued and losing the funding resource for future and current students. This will definitely affect the well-being of teachers and students. Next, I'd like to create a statement of what happened with this case study. And here, let me move it so we can see it. A computer library assistant at a K-8 school located in St. Regis made illegal copies of some recently purchased software for teachers to help stretch money earned by the PTA after years of fundraising, but a teacher voiced her concern to the principal, and the principal then asked the assistant to collect all copies and stop making more. So next, let's talk about the missing facts. So really, the missing facts are what's going on with the school board, what happens with the superintendent and the community members and the PTA members. So I think that there's a lot of unknown people that haven't been talked to yet. Next is what's the school board policy on copyright? Does the local government already have policies that are being violated? Who in the school is aware and unaware of the copyright violations? So who knows that this is happening and not saying anything or stopping it? And has staff been trained on copyright policies before this technology is out there? So next, I want to discuss what stakeholders were affected. So really the students are the ones that are really affected. The quality of education for the students will be affected without the access to the software technologies. Teachers could possibly quit or be fired as a result of this. And how do you determinedly knowingly violate copyright policies? St. Regis and surrounding communities, does the community lose trust within the school system and the PTA? Does the principal lose respect from the staff, administration, students, and community? Does the Board of Education and superintendent take administrative actions to remedy and resolve the situation? Do they create a solution to keep the respect of the community as well? And really, Mrs. Brandon, does she possibly create tension within the school community of teachers losing their trust in her as being a team player? So next, I'd like to talk about the improve and develop. Um, so what are the different options as me as a future leader? So here, I'll come back. There we go. So, option one, remedy the course. Find a way to pay for the individual license to give to the teachers and remove the flash drives. Do not inform district or companies about the copyright infringement. So, in other words, the Mr. Sample said, I want to keep the course, remove the flash drives from the library, ask PTA to purchase more license needed for teachers. If the PTA agreed, gives teachers a license, collect their flash drives. If the PTA does not, find money within the budget to replace the flash drives. So, in other words, I'm not going to tell anybody, but I'm going to take away the flash drives and I'm going to try to give you what you want. Option two, keep the course. Let teachers keep the copies of the software. Do not notify the company, district, or unaware staff. Let the situation diffuse itself and move on. Inform Mrs. Lynn that everything is going to be okay. Option three, react and adjust. Confiscate all the copies of the flash drives. Speak with the district personnel to create a plan to discipline and remedy the situation. And teach professional development around copyright policy as well as the district policies and procedures in regards to technology and copyright. Section six, that's my option four, being honest. Confiscate all the copies of the flash drives, contact the software company and explain the situation, contact the district personnel to create a plan of disciplinary action and necessary professional development. Write a letter notifying parents and community members of the mistake the school made and actions that the school is taking, and use this as a moment of learning as well as fixing. So next, option ones. I want to weigh the pros and the cons. So the pros of using option one is the needs of the teachers are the driving factor. Mr. Sample is viewed as a principal who meets the needs of the teachers, and the PTA acknowledges the need for additional funding. But the cons are as Mr. Sample is viewed as soft. Teachers will see that they could get away with unethical behavior, and the principal will support it. Well, we'll try to remedy it. School and districts are at a risk of lawsuit, and Mr. Sample knowingly did not report it. Community members lose respect for the school. Option two, keeping the course. Mr. Sample stays consistent with his view of not disrupting the staff and the community this year. This problem can grow very fast. Teachers can and will make more copies, and this will create a norm of unethical behavior in your school that it's going to be a lot harder to fix later on. School is liable for a lawsuit. Staff will divide, and Mr. Sample really puts himself at a strong risk of losing his job. Option three, react and adjust. So this puts a burden of liability on the district. So because you voice this with the district, it really puts it on the school district to say, okay, let's talk about what's the liability that we have. Creates a plan necessary for improvement. It creates an urgency to hire qualified technology teachers to get the software. Sets a tone in the school that the behavior is not acceptable. The cons, a risk of being deemed as incapable of doing your job as an administrator by the teachers, loses support from teachers, and students and teachers potentially lose the software. From this, you're taking a big risk of not having any more access to the technology. So next, I'd like to talk about my development of the plan. So what I did is I took each of the options and kind of highlighted through, and I highlighted in green what I'd like to take. So for my plan, I want to remove all the flash drives. That's gonna given. Ask for PTA support on purchasing the licenses. And then remove flash drives, discuss the plan with the district, grow teacher community as a result. So have professional development, and communicate with the district and the community. So putting this plan into action, what I did is I created a what am I going to do and how. Here, let me move this guy. So first, I'm going to remove all of the flash drives copied. Contact the district administration and the legal team. Interview all the parties so I make sure I hear from everybody's voices and there's nobody that knows something that doesn't say anything. Conduct all staff meeting to discuss the legalities of the situation that's happening. Conduct mandatory copyright training. So as a result of this, we're going to go through training so we as a school are in the forefront of this, and meet with the PTA to discuss the legalities of the situations and policies of the school boards. And then next, reevaluate the library assistant job status. That if this isn't working out and she's not taking her role seriously, I need to find someone else. So what may happen? The staff may rebel or ignore the significance of the training, and this may result in losing the community and teacher support. Who needs to know? The PTA, the staff, the school board, and the district admin all need to know this. In reality, the community of the school district does know. How to deal with it? Every staff member will have mandatory copyright and digital citizenship training. Mrs. Lynn, Mrs. Evans, and Mrs. Williams will all be watched and talked to see if their actions change. If individuals violate copyright policy, their position at the school will be terminated and the staff will lose the technology in their classroom as a result. So next, I'd like to talk about how this case study meets the standards PLO 6. So this case study demonstrated the necessity in applying the knowledge, skills, and commitments necessary to improve management, communication, technology, school-level government, and systems to create and improve data-informed, equitable school resources and apply to law, policies, and regulations. By not demonstrating the knowledge, skills, and commitments, the school district is at risk of losing federal funding and trust from the community. The school will lose funding and resources that promote current and future success and well-being of each student and adult. If St. Regis would be sued and lose funding, not only would the K-8 be impacted, but the entire district would be impacted. Students will lose access to technology software that would benefit their learning for years to come. Teachers will move 5 steps back. They will be at risk of losing access to technology, software, salary increases, job security, and classroom materials. As a result of this, the district would lose hard-to-come-by staff. Mr. Sample decides not to improve management, communicate, and school-level government, the operation system. He will directly hurt the current and future success and well-being of each student and adult and community member. Next, the CLO 6.3. This case study demonstrated how to evaluate the situation, create a list of people who played a key role in this event, list out multiple actions, and reflect with each action, as well as reflect on the possibility the plan does not work out. This process allows me to communicate about and implement laws and policies and regulations and adult success and well-being. If Mr. Sample decides not to communicate about it, he is putting his position at risk with the school as well as the funding and resources available. So next is the relevance. This case study is relevant to my learning because it gave me a very applicable real life scenario with additional funding with new classroom material. As a future leader, this case study and reflection has demonstrated the necessity of planning ahead of required training to ensure the implementation of new software is successful and sustainable. This case study also demonstrated its relevance in how to handle an ethical use of technology. The reflection of this action I would take with me for a couple days to reflect if I should immediately contact the software company or district personnel first. This internal conflict will exist and is relevant to my future success as a leader. So really in reflection, this case study reminded me of a conversation I had with a coworker. He was telling me that he had a buddy in Las Vegas who was able to download free trial versions into the full version to get access. And so he would put things on a flash drive. So at the time, I knew that this was unethical and that this teacher had access to it. And I don't know if he was using it or not, but he was telling me that his buddy had this access. But it really paralleled this situation, that he created a way to break copyright laws, and he could have potentially been using it in his classroom. So as a future leader, I will create and implement mandatory trainings for digital citizenship and copyright laws and policies and procedures. I'll stay ahead of the situation to ensure that every staff member understands their roles in ensuring the current and future success of every student in my school. This training will happen annually to ensure that changes to the law and policies are known by staff and administrators, and there's no assuming that people know what the laws are. Second way I'm going to implement this is to create a procedure to utilize technology in the school. Create a spreadsheet that teachers input what software in their classroom is using and would like to use if available. This will ensure that teachers are using the software available, but also what software I need to purchase so that they don't need to break the law to get it. I'll voice to my staff that I'll do everything in my power to get teachers what they need to be successful in my school, and they need to reciprocate that by ensuring that they're using legal and ethical behavior in the classroom to ensure the current and future success and well-being of every student and adult in the building. This next slide is the references that I used throughout this case study. And I'd like to thank you for watching my case study. I spent a lot of time and effort in this, and I'm excited to present this to you. Enjoy. Have a great evening.